Hello and welcome back to Özgür News. My name is Amelie and I present our monthly English program which summarizes news and commentary from the Middle East. We are part of Özgür TV, which publishes daily programs under the slogan of Inmidst of reality in the center of struggle. Today's topics include a short historical review of massacres by the Turkish state in December, news from the Rojava Revolution, union struggle in Turkey, Figen Yüksekdag's defense speech during her trial, political prisoners organizing a hunger strike for Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan, and finally, declarations of the 7th Marxist-Leninist Communist Party's Congress, as well as the 3rd Communist Women's Conference. In Turkey's history, the month of December is one of massacres. Most recently, the Roboski massacre of 2011, where 34 Kurdish civilians were murdered and many more injured by fighter jet bombardments. The U-2000 also saw a massacre of political prisoners across Turkey's prisons. Human rights associations commemorated these atrocities on the streets. Lastly, 45 years have passed since the Maraş massacre of 1978, during which more than 100 people of Alevi faith were murdered by Turkish fascists. The massacre is remembered each year by people across Turkey, Kurdistan, and the diaspora. The General Secretary of Alevi Bektashi Federation, Özgür Kaplan, delivered a commemorating speech.
The prison massacre targeting political prisoners, which took place in 20 of Turkey's prisons on 19th of December 2000, was largely commemorated by progressive organizations. In order to transfer political prisoners to increasingly isolated F-type prisons built with individual cell systems, the Turkish state carried out the operation Return to Life on 19th of December 2000. The operation led to massacres being carried out in 20 different prisons across Turkey. 28 prisoners were murdered and hundreds of prisoners were wounded. The Istanbul branch of the Human Rights Association chair, Gülseren Yolleri, held a speech in front of Ümraniye prison in remembrance of the prison massacre, in which she stated, 23 years ago, 20 prisons were attacked at the same time with chemical weapons, bombs, and construction equipment in order to break the resistance of prisoners. She stressed that prisons have turned into a human rights denial center and demanded that all responsible perpetrators be prosecuted, that S and Y-type prisons with severe isolation be closed indefinitely, and that torture and ill treatment end. In Izmir, a demonstration was held in front of Bucha prison. Arman Atılgan of the Progressive Lawyers Association said that what happened that day is fresh in our memory as comrades, friends, victims, and as lawyers. He continued to say, they should not think we have forgotten. We have reached a point where the state continues to build new prisons every year. The judiciary kills political prisoners and attempts to rule these murders as suicides in prisons. It has been 45 years since the massacre of Alevis in Maraş between 19th to 26th of December 1978. More than 100 people were murdered in the massacre, while 559 houses and nearly 290 workplaces belonging to Alevis were burned and destroyed. In the lawsuit filed after the massacre, which lasted 23 years, 22 people were sentenced to death, 7 people were sentenced to life imprisonment, and 321 people were sentenced to imprisonment from 1 year to 24 years. The General Secretary of Alevi Bektashi Federation, Özgür Kaplan, said, "The Maraş massacre is only one of the massacres of fascism in these lands. Because we know that there is Çorum, there is Malatya, and then there is a massacre in Sivas in the year 78 in which 8 people were massacred. There too, there was a massacre that continued and was carried out on the attack on a girl, on a deliberate attack. Then again, we know that we come to the massacres in Madımak, Gazi, Gezi, and Gar. The history of the peoples of Anatolia is also a history of being denied and massacred, and we are resisting this. If there is an uninterrupted massacre, we will continue to resist without interruption."
Airstrikes have once again hit the Rojava Revolution in the past weeks. The self-administration in northeastern Syria continues to be targeted by Turkish airstrikes, with vital infrastructure and residential areas being hit. The International Solidarity Network, People's Bridge, published the following statement.
Since Saturday evening, December 23rd, the Turkish army has launched a new wave of attacks on civilian settlements and infrastructure on the self-administration of northeast Syria. On December 25th, 8 civilians were killed during an airstrike. In a summary report issued by the Democratic Autonomous Administration in the North and East Syria region, DAANES, attacks with drones and heavy weapons on residential buildings, grain silos, a clinic, a train station, production facilities, a construction company, roads, a neighborhood in Heseke, and 10 checkpoints of the internal security forces in Cizre and Kobanesi confirmed. As in previous attacks by the Turkish fascist state, it is clear that the attacks are primarily directed against civilian infrastructure that guarantee the livelihood of the people in northeastern Syria. Turkey's assaults continue to pursue the goal of destroying the successes of the revolution in Rojava. The timing of these attacks is no coincidence, nor is it arbitrary. On the other hand, they are a response to the adoption of the new social contract, which is intended to provide the basis for consolidating the achievements of the revolution among the peoples of North and East Syria. At the same time, they also serve as retaliatory actions in response to the large-scale guerrilla operation against the Turkish occupation in the southern Kurdish regions of Hakurke, Metina, and Zab on December 22nd and 23rd, where the Turkish military suffered heavy losses. The Turkish state is using these developments to further strengthen its genocidal policy against the Kurdish people, especially against the people of northeast Syria, under the pretext of alleged self-defense. In response to the Turkish state's airstrikes against northeast Syria, the co-chair of the Self-Administration Executive Council, Hüseyin Osman, has called on the people of northeast Syria to defend themselves on the basis of legitimate self-defense and to protect the gains of the revolution. It emphasizes, "We remain committed to our ideals of uniting our people, realizing the project of the democratic nation, building a diverse Syria, and consolidating our victory. We promise our citizens that we will protect our achievements. We will continue our struggle until we build a free society." We, outside of northeast Syria, must follow this call as well and take the resistance against the Turkish attacks on self-administration to the streets globally. It is our duty and obligation to expose and stop the support of the imperialist forces such as NATO for the Turkish war of aggression, because the Turkish state is waging a war of aggression against the self-administration with the support of NATO. Only if we lead a broad and continuous resistance all over the world against the Turkish attacks and its imperialist supporters. We call on all migrants from North and East Syria, all organizations of the working left, and all progressive people to take to the street against the attacks of the Turkish state on the self-administration in northeast Syria.
Workers in Turkey have been joining together and have taken up the struggle in various unions and branches of work. Healthcare, metal, as well as textile workers have intensified their battle against harsh working conditions. The textile giant Özak Tekstil is a current target of Turkey and northern Kurdistan's workers. With Turkey being Europe's largest clothing producer, the fabricant of brands like Levi's, H&M and Zara has been experiencing union protests for over a month now. The struggle of Özak textile workers in Urfa, who resigned from Öz İplik İş and organized with Bir Tek Sen Union, has passed its 40-day mark. Making a statement in the field of resistance, Bir Tek Sen chairman Mehmet Türkmen said, "So far we have only held Levi's responsible because the Özak textile factory in Urfa produces for Levi's. However, Özak's factory in Malatya and Istanbul also produce for brands such as Zara, Hugo Boss, H&M, Marco Polo, Massimo Dutti, Cotton and De Facto. These brands are also responsible for these workers' rights violations. We call on all our class brothers and sisters, trade unions and friends of labour in Turkey and around the world to protest against these brands and to increase solidarity with Özak workers." Former Democratic People's Party co-chair Figen Yüksekdag held a speech during her trial hearing this past month. Having been a member of the Turkish parliament before facing imprisonment in the so-called Kobane trials in 2016, Yüksekdag spoke on her following the legacy of Turkish revolutionary Deniz Gezmiş when defending the cause of the Kurdish people.
Making her defense in the Kobani trial, former HDP co-chair Figen Yüksekdag stated that it was Deniz Geçmiş's legacy to defend the cause of the Kurdish people and said, "If the Kurdish people are burning next to me, I will go and burn too. And if I cannot do anything, I will get up and do it." Before I became Figen Yüksekdag, the co-chair of the HDP, an umbrella party, I was Figen Yüksekdag, the chairperson of SAP. Today, I greet my mother house with respect and love. I greet all my comrades and friends who are struggling in the ranks of SAP with respect. But while I was carrying out my SAP duty, these changes made a call to us. Life, struggle, people made a call to us. It called us to go beyond our own borders. It called us to respond to society's desire to unite and succeed by leaving our political borders behind us. This was a historical call, and it is a historical duty to hear the call. As a socialist, I had no other duty but to hear this call. We socialists have no right to turn our backs on the peoples and play socialism. We could not turn our backs while blood was flowing in front of us, while the Kurdish people were not recognized as equal. A socialist cannot do that. There is no such thing as saying that I have a socialism program, that after I bring the system of socialism, I will address all nations and take their rights into consideration. Socialism is based on an internationalist perspective and the unification of nations and their equal rights. No socialist in Turkey has the right to turn his back on the oppressed, the Kurdish people. I've criticized and will continue to criticize the mentality and parties that are discriminatory and look down on the Kurdish people. In the name of defending unity, there cannot be a socialism that does not know what it is saying, that confuses what is right and wrong. It is necessary to know where to take part in the struggle for rights without bending and twisting. My party, SAP, and other socialist parties have clearly defined their positions.
As part of the campaign for Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan's freedom, political prisoners of the PKK and PJAK have launched a hunger strike. The striking prisoners themselves have issued a statement from inside the Diyarbakir High Security Prison.
The hunger strike, launched by PKK and PJAK prisoners to end the isolation of Kurdish people's leader Abdullah Öcalan and to ensure his physical freedom, is going on. The strike, which started on the 27th of November, is part of the campaign for freedom for Abdullah Öcalan and a solution to the problems of the Kurdish people, will continue until the 15th of February 2024. Prisoners held in Diyarbakir High Security Closed Prison No. 2, Block A, sent a message about the hunger strike, drawing attention to Abdullah Öcalan's role for peace. The prisoners recalled the events that took place after the settlement process ended by the AKP. The prisoners stated, following in their statement, "Acting with the understanding that the lesser of two evils the better, we demand the immediate lifting of the aggravated isolation imposed on Abdullah Öcalan in order to stop this conflict and war, the immediate transfer of Imralı prison to house arrest in consideration of the situation that will affect his health problems, the restoration of his most basic legal and human rights, and finally the initiation of a new dialogue process." The Human Rights Association, IHD, writes in their statement, "Rights violations in Turkish prisons are almost as old as the history of the Republic, and the fact that no government that has come to power has developed a lasting policy to eliminate these violations has further exacerbated the problem. Our association was founded by relatives of prisoners, intellectuals, right defenders, and lawyers who came together after the September 12 military coup to put an end to the practices of torture and ill treatment and violations of the right to life in Turkish prisons. With our 37 years of experience, we can say that the most important reason for the violations in Turkish prisons is the state's unwillingness to ensure internal peace, especially the unresolved Kurdish issue for years. The state's insistence on an extreme security policy, the illegalization of people and institutions fighting for rights and freedoms led to the fact that the number of prisoners in Turkish prisons and the violations are increasing day by day. Prisons in Turkey have become centers of human rights violations, where many problems have become permanent and practices that threaten the lives of prisoners are applied. Numerous violations, such as isolation and segregation, torture and ill treatment, prevention of social rights, banishment, prevention of treatment of sick prisoners, prevention of release based on the decisions of the administrative board, suspicious deaths that undermine the right to life occur in prisons. Ömer Hayyar, Konrad Hamli Yıldırım, and Beyaz Aktaş, who are detained together with PKK leader Abdullah Öcalan in Imralı maximum security prison, have been isolated from the outside world, not allowed to see their lawyers and families, and not allowed to communicate by phone or letter. For 33 months, his family and lawyers' requests for visits have not been accepted. Absolute isolation violates both the domestic legal system and the international conventions that the state is obliged to respect. Although the European Committee for the Prevention of Torture has repeatedly made findings and recommendations regarding the isolation and other rights violations in Imrale High Security Closed Prison, no steps have been taken by the authorities to lift the isolation. Our association has repeatedly applied to the Ministry of Justice to visit Imrale High Security Closed Prison and to determine the practices in the prison. However, the authorities have not responded to our applications. The establishment of an honorable peace in Turkey is only possible with the end isolation and isolation practices in prisons and the elimination of discriminatory practices against prisoners held in prisons for political reasons, especially seriously ill prisoners. As the Human Rights Association, we once again call for an end to the torture of isolation, release seriously ill prisoners, abolish administrative observation boards, and peace now.
The Marxist-Leninist Communist Party announced that it held its 7th Congress between the 29th of May and the 16th of June. Simultaneously, the Communist Women's Organization, KKO, announced it had successfully held its 3rd Women's Conference. The party and its women's organization published a statement following the results of each event.
Brothers and sisters, the MLKP, which convened its 7th Congress after a lively discussion process, overcoming all the ordinary and period-specific extraordinary obstacles in front of an illegal revolutionary war party, once again demonstrated in practice the mentality and culture of socialist democracy, the principle of collectivism, and its commitment to proper party functioning at all levels. Brothers and sisters, our 7th Congress, our party, throughout the process after the 6th Congress, has maintained its leadership continuity, organizational continuity, and line continuity, demonstrating a practice embodied in the reality of the resisting and fighting party. Despite this, it concluded that the ideological political liquidationism organized by the fascist regime of misrule, increasingly intensified attack, and fascist psychological warfare based on lies had an impact on its ranks, and that it could not prevent the liquidationist drift within the member force, including a narrow section of cadres. Reminding that illegality and military means and forms of struggle are not a preference but a necessity in the face of the enemy characterized by fascism and denialist colonialism, in the face of the enemy in the armor of prohibition, forced fascist state terror from top to bottom. Our 7th Congress drew attention to the fact that some structures have de facto broken away from making politics with free or illegal means of agitation and propaganda, armed organizations, and forms that this situation is gradually beginning to affect ideological political understandings, and called on revolutionary parties and organizations to face this reality, to reject the position and mentality of legal revolutionism through practice. Brothers and sisters, our Congress called on the workers, laborers, women, youth, intellectuals, and artists who were forced to migrate to different parts of the world from Europe to Canada for economic and political reasons. Workers, laborers, women, youth, intellectuals, and artists who were condemned to the pain of cultural contempt, racism, discrimination, longing for the land where they were born and raised, having to work in the heaviest and worst jobs, not to allow themselves to be ground in a mill of imperialist capitalism's selfishness, individualization, and rehabilitation, to raise the demand for a free, dignified, and fraternal life, to support the MLKP for the organization and victory of the revolution, to shoulder tasks and the ranks of the MLKP, KKÖ, KGÖ, and to participate in the class struggle in the countries. We declare that we will continue the resistance against the attacks of the colonial fascist regime of misery, against the women's liberation struggle and the female gender, as well as against individual male violence, oppression, and exploitation under its protection, and that we, as KKÖ and KKÖ Women Communists, will expose ourselves unlimitedly for this cause. We pledge loyalty and victory to the memory and ideals of our KKÖ immortals. We call on the LGBTI+ movement to frustrate the policies of the fascist chiefdom regime, to separate and divide the gender liberation struggle, to strengthen the alliance with other workers and oppressed people's struggles, especially the women's liberation struggle. We convey the good wishes, support, and solidarity of KKÖ in the struggle for political and social freedom. We call on all women who want to fight against male domination, who believe in women's liberation and true equality, who are full of longing for a gender-neutral society, to stand up against male domination and the imperialist capitalist system, which is its main basis, to rise up, to rebel, to break the chains of domestic slavery, to take action at home, at school, in the factory, in the neighborhood, in the workshop for freedom. We call on all communist women from Kurdish, Turkish, Arab, Circassian, Laz, Georgian, Armenian, Greek, Roma, Bosnian, Albanian, Assyrian, Chaldean, the Yazidi nation, and national communities from various beliefs to support the KKU, to offer their opportunities, to spread their views and calls, to join the KKU, to carry the KKU struggle wherever they are, women.
Thank you for watching Özgür News. This program is published at 6 p.m. Central European Time on the last Sunday of every month. For more news, follow us on our social media channels. Until next time.